Hey guys, what is up? Unrested here, and today should be Osoroshii Saturday, and I had an episode ready, and it was supposed to be the language barrier one that you saw 2 weeks ago, and I released that one early. The reason I did was because before that one, I had actually planned to do a Silent Hill PT video. As you may know, Silent Hill was about to come out with a new game. Konami and Hideo Kojima were working together to make a new game, and that completely fell through. It was turning out to be one of the creepiest survival horrors to date. I don't know if you had taken a look at the Silent Hills PT demo, but it was incredibly creepy. I played through it myself. Just an absolutely frightening experience with not really like a lot of gore or blood or splatterpunk type themes used, just this beautiful, dark, depressing essence of everything metaphysically scary that could be possible. And it was turning out to be a great game, and now it's canceled. I was actually working on a whole video. I can actually even show you. I'll look with you so that we can see together. Yeah. There you go, you can see me there. So like I put myself inside the Silent Hill house and everything, and some people even actually helped me do some green screen stuff for this, and it had like an analysis of game theories that were turning around for this new demo and talking about kind of the themes of horror that have followed through the different Silent Hills. And I guess, if I get like a huge, bunch of private messages that are like, you should still release the unfinished video and still show that, I'll do it. But I mean, first of all, I want to thank everyone who watches Osoroshii Saturday every weekend. You are so awesome, and you give me so much inspiration to keep going. But it is my least watched show, so for me to put out something that was not fully complete, I felt like I was letting down the fans. And I felt like that could possibly screw up my viewership on that even more, making it an even less watched show, which I did not want to do to that. I want to continue to keep it higher and higher so that more and more people see it, it spreads more and more that happens, the more motivated I get to improve the quality of it, let's be honest. Nonetheless, I'm not going to go another week here without giving you an Osoroshii Saturday. So, today what I'd like to do is just go old school and sit here and tell you some tales. Now, the good thing about today's tales, well, I don't know if this is good, this might be bad for some people, these are especially creepy tales. There's just 3 of them. They're a little bit long, but the reason these 3 tales that I'm about to tell you are extremely scary is because they are true stories. They are things that have either happened to a close friend of mine, or an acquaintance, or maybe even someone I met through YouTube who lives here in Japan. And I'm gonna go through each of these stories and try to tell them in as much detail as I can. But I want to tell them from memory. I don't want to just read them. I don't want to just read the news reports that came with them, because a lot of these actually have news reports that followed up with them. And afterwards you can, if you want to make sure my sources are legit, you can go check it out yourself. I'm sure you could enter in some of the keywords that I use in these stories to check these out. But here we go. Let's start with number 1. Our first one today is a story about a police officer and a friend of mine who had to call this police officer when she heard a disturbance at an apartment close to hers. So she's in bed at night. I think it was somewhere around like 12 p.m. This is a Japanese friend, Japanese girl. She's probably college age. I'm not going to give out her name or anything like that, because I'm sure she actually doesn't want that. She said I can tell the story, but she didn't give me any kind of, she didn't say, yeah, and say my name, say it was who I said. So I'm just going to go with Japanese girl. Let's call her Haruka. Okay, it's the most common Japanese name I can think of for a girl. Haruka's sleeping in her apartment at about 12 p.m. She's a college-age girl. She's going to a graphic design school, a graphic design trade school. It's the weekend. she has a test early the next day on Monday after the weekend finishes, and she settles in for an early night about 10 or 11, definitely dead asleep by 12, when she's woken up by a scream. And she said this scream was like blood-curdling scream, like, you know, someone, you know, you've got your different type of screams. You got your screams like you're partying and stuff like that, woohoo scream. You've got your scared scream, like oh my gosh scream, and then you've got like your blood-curdling I'm in intense pain scream. And she said that's what this was. She said it was kurushi, which means like suffering, pain scream. Literally, her translation of it would have been like the cry of suffering. And it freaked her out. And she said the first shrill scream happened, you know, just shot her out of bed. She put her ear to the wall to see if it was within her own apartment complex, and she said she was pretty sure it wasn't, because she heard a second scream, and she could tell it was coming from outside her window. And now in Japan, I don't know if everybody realizes how close together we are. Like, an apartment building can be built, and another one can be built, and there can be like this much space between them. Like, you couldn't fit yourself sideways between these two apartment buildings, and that's how her setup was. It wasn't her apartment, but the next apartment complex next to hers was literally like, if she looked through her window and the person next to her opened their window, they'd be like staring at each other with like very little space in between. So it was happening in the apartment building next to hers. She didn't know exactly which room, but she could hear it through her window, and it was obviously emanating through one of the windows on the wall that faced her apartment. And then there was a third scream like that, and then she said, and that one wasn't quite as loud, but still sounded in pain. And then a fourth one, and she said again, definitely in pain, but starting to quiet down more and more. And then a fifth one, and then it just stopped. And she said the weird thing about the fifth one was that as it was going through the same cry of like pain or scream or whatever, it cut off halfway. So she's freaked out, all right? She first thinks about calling her boyfriend, calls him. He's like, you know, look, I'll come over there and take care of you, but, you know, it's gonna take me, you know, 5 or 10 minutes. In the meantime, you need to be calling the police. So she's like, oh, that's true. Her panic mind's not thinking in order right now. So that's what she does right after that. Calls the police, and right away they connect her to who the closest to her area is as far as a policeman. I guess like the way dispatch would. I don't know exactly the way police dispatch works in Japan. I've never studied anything like this, so I can't say 100% for certain how it works, but someone close to her area is dispatched. Usually, no matter what, if it's not a person, it's the koban closest to your ward office, and a koban means police box. So that's who she calls into, that's who dispatches a person. And in the meantime, the boyfriend shows up before the policeman does. And he gets there and he's like calming her down. He's like, just chill out, we're gonna tell him everything you heard, we're gonna report everything that happened, I'll spend the night here, I'll make sure you're safe. The policeman comes to the door like almost like a minute or two later, like literally she can hear him like rushing up the stairs. So she's like, I guess the guy's like kind of in a, you know, knows something as bad has happened around this area, and the police are already kind of on the case. And what's pretty odd though is that when she does open the door for the policeman, who she can check to make sure it is, because she's got like a lot of times in Japan you ring your doorbell and a camera turns on at your front door down below at the bottom of the building and gives you like a camera feed up to your apartment. So she makes sure it is. But she said the weird thing is when this guy comes to the door, is she can see that like while he's downstairs being seen by the camera of her upstairs apartment, he's buttoning up his police shirt and he's got like plain clothes underneath. And she just thinks like, I don't know, maybe he just got on duty, maybe he just got on shift, like what's going on? That's a little bit strange, but nonetheless, he seems legit. He shows his badge, he's got his ID on there and everything like that. He does the same kind of protocol that he would do for, you know, calling in and reporting it to the koban what she heard. She describes the screaming and everything she heard from the apartment next to her. I should say the apartment building next to her. And he says, okay, all right, don't worry, we'll take care of this. We'll handle it from here. You know, for tonight, maybe just, you know, stay inside your apartment for now, lock your doors. And in the morning, we'll get back to you. and let you know exactly what we found out, just to make sure your area is safe and everything. And she can kind of be put at ease at this point. Later the next day, the police come back to her apartment, but this time it's two different officers that she'd never seen before. They looked nothing like the officer had come the night before, who she said had like been running and like was out of breath and like buttoning up his shirt to get there on time because perhaps he had just started his shift. They're like, hey, so this guy who came last night, what did he look like? And she described the officer who came, and they're like, yeah, They turn to each other like, yep. And she's like, what? And they're like, well, can you go back to the Koban with us, because we need to talk to you about the cop you talked to last night. She's like, what the hell? Like, this, why is this about this cop who came? Why isn't it about the screaming I heard? She gets back to the Koban, and her boyfriend's still with her, luckily, so he can kind of keep her calm through all of this. And they're like, well, look, we don't want you to get too freaked out, but you're going to hear it on the news no matter what. There was a girl murdered there yesterday. And she was like a single 27-year-old girl who was dating a guy who was having an affair with his wife. And he was cheating on his wife. And he kept promising to marry this girl that he's cheating with, telling her he's going to leave her family. And this is, I'm kind of, right now, I'm intertwining what the news eventually reported and what the police reported to her. Of course, they don't get that personal, but the news does actually get a little more personal as they investigate, so she would have found this out anyway. And I remember watching the reports myself, because this actually happened really close to my apartment too. This was only the next ward over in Abenobashi, where I live really close to Abenobashi. And they're like, so he's cheating on his wife. He keeps telling this girl he's going to marry her. It never happens, though. He never leaves his wife. She gets pissed off. She starts yelling at him, why aren't you leaving your wife? Why aren't you leaving your kids? Why aren't you marrying me? You told me you were going to do this for 2 years now. And he starts yelling back at her. They get into a verbal argument. Verbal turns into physical argument. They're hitting, they're punching. The guy stabs her. She dies. And they found out for sure it was the boyfriend that killed her. Now, what the freaky part about all this is, and you know, obviously that part already is freaky, it's horrendous, it's horrible, is that her boyfriend was a cop. He was a police officer. And actually, the police officer who had murdered her was the police officer who had taken the dispatch call, because obviously he was definitely the closest on scene when this happened, when she heard the screaming, because he was there doing the act. He was the one murdering the woman. He was the killer. And he tried to play it off like, oh, I'm here to investigate, that's why I'm so close to this, and this is my Koban in my ward, in my district, in my area that I'm supposed to be watching, and that's why I'm here right away. What kind of screwed him up is that other people reported that when he came running out of that apartment building, he was putting on his cop clothes because he hadn't started his shift yet. It was going to start after that, and he was in plain clothes. And that's kind of what gave him away and put him at the scene. Otherwise, he was going to try and cover it up and just act like, oh my goodness, there was a murder and I got called out and I was going to check it out and see what happened. But everything linked back to him that he had been dating this girl for a while. Our next story is one that I actually told already, but I pretty much made my own version of it. It was told to me by an English teacher here in Japan. And it was the one that you recently saw called Language Barriers. That is based on a completely true story, or as far as the person reported, it's as true as can be. One of the first things that always strikes me when people want to tell me tales, their personal scary stories or paranormal tales, is what their kind of disposition is. If I get a person who is kind of, I guess, seemingly overly too spiritual, I don't necessarily want to debunk their story right away, but I will say it doesn't always give it the most legit feeling. For example, if I have someone who's like, Ghost? You like ghosts? Well, I've got a ghost story for you. I love ghosts. They're so spooky. The people who really intrigue me, that tell me ghost stories, are the ones who almost seem like they don't want to tell their tale. And that's kind of how this was when I was told the tale of what actually happened with the story called Language Barriers. If you haven't watched that Osoroshii Saturday, it's okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to start over the whole story from the beginning, and we're going to tell you what actually happened and what this guy actually saw. So there is a guy who does live out in Kobe who has his own English school that he did just open. He literally only opened it, like, I guess, maybe 6 months ago or something like that. So this has happened pretty recently. And he did actually purchase an old building. He purchased from top to bottom every floor of the building, hollowed it out, had it refurbished, and it was, I think, 3 stories high, and it had a basement too. And so he's got 4 stories that he can turn into a school. That means he can have like all different level classes on each one. Usually in a Kaiwa English conversation school. Teaches everything from small children, as young as ages 1.5 to 3, on up to usually even Obachan, which is old ladies who have retired and have a million different hobbies, from sewing to learning a little bit of English because they can finally travel now that their husband has retired from work. So you usually get all ages, and you obviously can't put them all in the same class. So that's what this was. It was a building full of different classrooms for different ages, and this is what the guy had established. And one night when he was closing up, this is the story that he told me. And now, mind you, he didn't even actually find me or try to tell me this story. I was at the YouTube Hanami meetup, and one of his friends brought him over and was like, hey, my friend had this really weird experience happen to him. You gotta listen to what happened at his school. And so I was like, all right. And he wasn't, how should I say, withdrawn or introverted or anything like that, but he wasn't one of those overly spiritual, kind of like carrying crystals around with him everywhere type of guy. He's just, laid back, sort of everyday, typical gaijin who's just, not really interested in the paranormal, more interested in just living a normal life and having a business in Japan. But he was like, all right, yeah, I'll tell you the tale. Here's how it goes. So he's closing up his shop, and he's done for the night for all his English lessons. Everybody's left, everybody's gone home. All he's got left with him is like 1 or 2 staff members in the back, and he's pretty much shutting all the doors when he hears a knock on one of the windows. And he looks out and he sees this old lady, and it's an old Japanese lady, and she's carrying a small dog. I remember the exact description he gave me of this. And she's pointing like she wants to get inside, and he's like, what? And so he points around to the door that's the back door to the place, and he hears a knock on there. He hits the doorbell thing, the camera comes on, he can see she's standing there, she's got the dog. And he opens the door, and she's not there. So he's like, what the hell is this, like, is this kind of like ring the doorbell and run? But why would an old lady do that, and how could she even do that? I mean, she's old, she's like hunched over, she's carrying a dog. This doesn't seem like typical behavior for an old lady. That's when he hears a knock on the front door of this building. He goes there, he opens it up. The lady's standing there with the dog. And she's like, can I come in for a second? And he's like, oh, okay. And he said he was a little bit surprised because she, although her English was somewhat broken and, very heavily accented, she could still speak English. And she came in and she's like, I'm trying to get down to the basement because that's where my family lives. And he was a bit confused. He was thinking, well, wait, how is that possible? I own this whole building and I've got a classroom on every floor. There's no family living in here. And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. He's like, I own the whole building here. We've got an English school and there's different classrooms on each level. She said, well, my family though, they live in the basement. We own the first floor, and I need to get down there and see them, and I couldn't figure out another way other than enter through here to try and get down the stairs and get to the basement. I'm sorry for bothering you, but I need to get down there so that I can get into my family's house. And he's really confused at this point. He's like, I don't understand. Like, maybe you have the wrong building? And she's like, no, we've lived here for a long time. And he's noticing like the staff behind him starting to give looks like, what's going on? What is this lady talking about? So he's, for their safety and for, maybe he's thinking, well, maybe this lady's confused, Alzheimer's, dementia, lost, who knows? I don't want to make my staff any more upset. I'm going to just take her outside and have a further talk with her to just see if maybe I can help her, send her on her way, point her in a different direction. He's like, can we go outside? Is it okay? And she's like, oh, okay. And he takes her outside. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I own this whole building. Like, I don't know what you're talking about because I own everything from the basement on up. And she's like, no, that's impossible because my family's lived there for at least 50 years now. He's like, I'm sorry, maybe you've got the wrong building. Can I help you find another place? And she's like, no, it's okay. I'll find my home. And she walked off. She just left with the dog and everything. He said she was really nice, really polite, didn't throw any kind of fit or anything that she couldn't come in. And the next day, he did call his real estate agent and say, hey, you know, like, I'm kind of worried. This lady came last night and she was looking to get in there. And I think, you know, maybe she was lost or like, you know, she couldn't find her way home. And I just want to see if like there's somebody I can contact to make sure she's okay. Or should I call the police or what should I do? And they're like, oh, wait, is she the lady holding the dog? And they're like, she's like, yeah, what? You know who I'm talking about? They're like, yeah, she's like an old lady, right? And she can speak a little bit of English and she's holding a dog. And he's like, yeah, exactly. That's who I'm talking about. Well, what should I do about her? And they're like, oh, don't worry. She's already dead. And they're like, he's like, what? What do you mean she's already dead? She died? They're like, yeah, she died like 20 years ago. And he's like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, well, you see, everybody who's ever rented that place has that lady come back and try to ask if she can go down to the basement floor. And they're like, don't worry, it only happens like one time and then she never comes back again. But yeah, her family used to live there a long time ago. I don't know exactly how her family died. They just died of old age, they moved or whatever. But apparently her ghost comes back at least one time for each person living there and asks if she can go down to the basement floor. Some people have written to me and said, Scott, that doesn't sound like it could be true because I've heard in Japan, you have to report if somebody died in the apartment and then it can, you know, reduce the price of the house and stuff like that. That is true, but you only have to report up to 8 years ago if somebody died within the past 8 years. This being 20, obviously, is way more than 8. So that's the situation with that. That guy told me this story. I would have to say it's one of the very few times I've heard someone tell me a ghost story face to face where I felt like, yeah, this guy is not making anything up. He's not bullshitting me. He's not some kind of like, ooh, I like the hooky spooky stuff. Here's a scary story for you. Like, I get that. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody who sends me stories. I love your stories no matter what, okay? But obviously there's, you know what I'm talking about. There's some people who you're like, man, this guy's not screwing around. And then there's other people who are like, okay, you're really in touch with that spiritual world. Anyway, I thought I'd tell you the true story that really happened, what that guy had really seen. Okay, last story. Here we go. This one's, it's kind of a sad one too, so I hate, I don't know, like, sometimes I feel kind of guilty when I tell a story where it's like sad. You're like, I wish a person hadn't died. Like even the first story I just told you right now, where the one girl got murdered because the guy was having an affair. It's sad, but I mean, it's scary too, right? So, I had a friend of a friend working at Nova. And if you didn't know Nova was a giant at Kiowa. It exists again now, but in a smaller form, but a long time ago it existed. It got really huge. The place I worked at had over 600 teachers. I didn't know everybody there, so I would see a lot of these teachers every day and not talk to every single person. I probably had like 9 or 10 close friends there, and that's about it. And this is one of these 9 or 10 close friends that told me this story of what happened to another teacher that apparently had left right before I got there, right off the plane. This was back in February 2007. I got here, February 14th, 2007. So this happened like maybe a little bit after that. A little bit before that this happened. There was a guy who got here to Japan, and just a normal guy, same story as me, looking for work as an English teacher, started with Nova. And one of my friends who was still teaching there said, for this friend, everything started out cool. He did the normal things every gaijin does. He went partying, he went to clubs, he went out drinking like you do. A lot of us do this when we get here. The guy was only like 24, 25. I was 27 when I got here, so I'm almost around the same age. I settled down at around 30, so I'm not still doing the party life, and I'm much older now. I'm 30, almost 36 now. I'm 35, but I'll be 36 very soon. And I too, at one time though, lived this party life, so I know exactly what they're talking about. And he was into this. He was into this whole party life when you first get here. It's a good way to meet the locals, to get a lot of Japanese teaching through immersion. A better way to learn the language is to actually go out and speak Japanese with people at clubs and bars and coffee shops and cafes, and that's what this guy was doing. Nothing wrong with that at all. And of course he was dating around too. It's very common for when you're hanging around these different areas, you'll meet many Japanese women who are very interested in dating a gaijin. And that's what happened. He dated a few of these girls, and one of them he got pregnant. And at first he had tried to talk to her about having an abortion. It didn't go through. She wasn't going to have it. So pretty much they talked it over, and kind of both of them reluctantly decided they were going to get married and try and start a family and raise this kid together. He himself believed that if she was not going to have an abortion, this would be the right thing to do, and she was actually deeply religious, so in her mind this was the right thing to do, which, so be it. They did go through with the marriage. It was a short, quick, cheap marriage. It was one of the type in Japan where people just get the pictures taken. They don't actually pay for a full formal reception or everything like that. They couldn't actually afford it because he was making barely anything on a teacher's wage and she didn't work. That would be a little bit hard to raise a family. Back on the old Nova pay. I'm not saying every English teacher doesn't make enough to raise kids. That's not true. So he's struggling to try and save as much as he can as she's about to have the baby, and he's starting to get more and more stressed out. People can tell at work, and it was getting worse and worse for him as far as people asking him to go hang out and party still because they didn't know his situation. Like I said, there's 600 teachers there. We don't all know each other really well, but when other teachers would see him, they'd pass him by again and be like, "Hey dude, how come you never come out anymore and party with us, bro? You need to come out." And they're just trying to be nice. They're just trying to ask this guy to go along. They just thought oh, he's out of the scene for a while. They didn't know his story, that he had gotten a girl pregnant, had a small, quiet marriage, and was soon going to have a kid and tried and settle down. And I think this kind of stressed this guy out even more. He started to kind of long for that party life once again, even though he was now moving into a stage of his life where he kind of needed to be settling down. Let's be honest, if you're going to try and raise a kid in Japan, it's expensive. If you try to lead a party life and raise a kid, they might conflict, okay? I think that there's probably a way to do it. It probably is very possible. I think you need to practice temperance. Let's put it that way. You need to practice temperance with the party side of it, but that wasn't really on his mind at the time. So he delved back into the scene. He dove right back into the scene of partying it up and everything. And this caused a lot of conflict in his marriage, of course. He's spending late nights out, partying with his friends, spending lots of money on drinks because drinks are not cheap in Japan. You can hit a few bars that have specials, and you can pay $5 to the cheapest I've ever seen is $3. And he was doing this again. He was going to the expensive bars, though, the expensive dance clubs, spending all his money, partying it up with friends. And fights with his wife, of course, start to happen at this point. He's not saving for the kid anymore. He's spending all his money on alcohol, booze, partying. He's starting to meet other girls again. He's starting to try and start date on the side again on his wife, which is, she's pregnant right now and he's out dating other girls. I mean, holy cow, obviously she's distraught, understandably so. This leads to fighting, conflict in their house, conflict in their marriage. He's thinking about moving out. He's asking friends at work if he can move in with them. They're kind of like, whoa, yo, dude, I live in a one-room apartment. That's the way Japan works, right? You can't really, it'd be hard to move somebody else in, let's put it that way. You want to share a one-room mansion, and by mansion I mean it's just one room. You might not even have a bathroom in there or a shower. You might have a communal one. So it would be hard, especially with the pay that we used to get back at this place. It wasn't very good. So he's getting even more stressed out. And then finally one day he disconnects communication with everyone from work, doesn't come in from work anymore, doesn't show up, doesn't answer his calls, doesn't answer texts anymore, and rumor starts to circulate that he's left Japan. And everyone's like, what's going on? Why did he leave Japan? Like, you know, he had a wife to take care of, a baby. Like, did they leave with him back to his country? And I don't know. I don't specifically know which country this guy's from. I'm not going to blame Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or America, or England. It had to be one of those countries if he was teaching English. I don't know which one he was from. So he does that. He goes back. He disappears from work. We don't know if he's gone back to his country or what he's done, but he's not communicating with any of us. We're wondering if he got a new job, if he headed off back home, if he took his wife and his baby there. Maybe she asked him to move back because his life there was too much parties and drinks and everything. So finally, one of our friends comes into work one day. He's like, dude, I got the weirdest phone call last night. And we're like, oh, what happened? And he's like, so do you remember so-and-so? And I'm not going to say the guy's name because honestly, to be 100%, I just don't even remember what this guy's name was. I saw his face a couple of times when they were talking about the fact that he had left the school. But I didn't personally ever meet this dude, so I never actually learned his name, learned about him much more than this. And I kind of put the story behind me until this little part popped up right here. He gets the call and he says, yes, so-and-so, remember he hasn't been coming to work and we've been hearing rumors that like maybe he went back to his country. Well, that's not true. He definitely didn't go back to his country. His visa's still here in Japan. But his real estate company for his apartment called me last night and asked if there was anything I could tell them about his whereabouts because number one, he hadn't paid rent. Number two, he had left the apartment locked. Number three, he hadn't gone into his apartment, it seemed like, for a very long time. So my friend was like, wow, that's really bad. I don't know what could be going on. Is there any way I could help? And they were like, well, actually, yeah, we don't really speak any English, and everything in his, and this whole conversation obviously is going on in Japanese at the time, I'm just translating it for you. They're like, we don't really speak any English, so we need somebody who could go in there and help us, like maybe look at some stuff and figure out like some kind of contact number or something from the information he left in his apartment. Would you be willing to go with us when we open it up and like help us look through stuff and help us translate a couple of things? Like they're like, we'll even like pay you some money. Well, you know, we'll pay for your, you know, transportation there and everything. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And he met with the real estate agent afterwards, and well, actually, you know, he told us this story first. He told us about the phone call first, and then he's like, so I'm going to meet with him tonight and go check out the apartment. And we're like, whoa, that's crazy. Well, tell us what you find and everything. So he told us about it later. He goes in with them, and they open it up, and he said right away, the first thing that hits him in the face is just the apartment smells like shit. He said it just smelled awful, just disgusting, like just rotting everything, fish just decaying, everything, like food decaying, just an apartment that hasn't been very well taken care of, and a lot of stuff that's been left to rot. All right, the power's been turned off, so everything, the refrigerator's rotted out. There's flies all over, you know, like little fruit gnats and everything like that. And he said, but the most disgusting aspect of it was that there was like mud everywhere, that like, he said like whoever had been living there last had tracked in all this dirt, and there was just like brown patches of mud over everything. Like he said, all over the bathtub. He remembered thinking like that someone had like rolled around and like mud wrestled and then tried to take a bath. I remember him describing it like that. He was like, it was either like Swamp Thing had tried to wash himself off in their bathtub, or like someone had been in a mud wrestling contest and then tried to wash themselves off in the bathroom. He's like, I don't know how you get your house that dirty. Like, even if you're a really, you know, scummy guy, like, it's understandable, but I mean, at the same time, his wife was like a housewife. Usually they're cleaning all day while the other guy's at work. At the very least, you know, you're gonna have a baby soon. You want to have the house a little bit hygienic. And he said it was just like no place for a baby. He said definitely, he's like, this would not be good for a baby. This wouldn't be good for any human being to live in. It was so damn dirty. He couldn't believe it. And, you know, they went through some contacts and stuff like that. He said they eventually found like the guy's family phone numbers back in the States, or wherever he was from. Once again, I want to say everybody's American. I don't know for sure this guy was American. I don't know which English-speaking country he was from, but it was definitely one of the English-speaking countries. So, you know, one of us, New Zealand, Australia, England, America, Canada, one of us is to blame. He's gone. His wife's not there. the baby should have been born by now too, and the baby's not there, of course, which, I mean, I guess maybe thank goodness that the baby's not there, but who knows, because, well, you'll see. And he was just like, God, this is disgusting, man, how they live here. And the apartment real estate agent too, she was just like, oh my God, like, you know, we're gonna have to tear this whole place apart and refurbish it. Like, even she kept saying, like, you remember she was saying, keep deny, like, oh, it's so dirty, and like, she kept saying, like, doshio, like, what are we gonna do? And he said, like, he got her some contact numbers, showed her, like, this one says, like, it's for his mother, this one says it's for his dad. Apparently they had tried to call those too, and they couldn't get in contact with anyone back in his home country. And apparently, like, this dude just went totally missing. Like, he dropped off the face of the planet. His wife dropped off the face of the planet, and whatever baby they were supposed to have never showed up either. Never. If it was born somewhere, we don't know about it. To this day, all right? Totally disappeared. Police did everything they could to investigate it. They did like a great job of just like following every lead they possibly could. The last thing they checked, they said they had seen the guy around in a bunch of bars, like super wasted. And then just he would walk off into the night and be like, I'm going back home. And his friends wouldn't think anything about it until he just stopped showing up less and less to these bars. But they said every time they'd see him, he was like crazy, super wasted, and just like, you know, talking like crazy gibberish because he was so drunk about, like, he was like, oh, my wife's always yelling at me and we're always fighting and stuff. Like, they said that's all he would ever talk about, is how much like him and his wife were fighting and complaining about that. So they just didn't really think about it. They just thought, like, yeah, the dude's wasted, he's drunk, whatever. But then he just stopped showing up less and less to even to these clubs and bars, and then just totally disappeared completely from that scene. And that was pretty much the last time anyone had actually seen him around Japan in general. As for his wife, there was no leads at all. She had been staying in the house up to that point, and then she had just dropped off the face of the planet as well. Her mother had already died a long time ago, so her mother wasn't out looking for her. Her father and her were kind of like disconnected, like they were never very close, so he had never really gone out of his way to search for her. So that's kind of a sad case there. They don't know exactly what happened with her. But the scariest aspect of it was that later, the real estate agent called my friend back again and was like, hey, you remember like all that mud we saw all over the apartment, all the like dirt and everything that had been tracked in, and all like the footprints from dirt and everything outside? And my friend was like, yeah, what was up with that? Were they able to clean all that up? And she's like, well, actually the police asked to see the apartment afterwards, and that was actually all dry blood. So something pretty horrible went down in that apartment, and to this day we still don't know exactly what happened. But my friend had actually walked around this apartment that we don't know if it was a murder scene or some kind of horrible domestic violence scene. No one knows if the guy murdered his wife and kid, or if he murdered his wife and kid and killed himself, but then how did his body disappear? Of course, if he killed them, he can make their bodies disappear. What happened to him? Some people think it might have been like a murder-suicide, like he killed them, did something with their bodies, and then killed himself somehow. For example, a lot of people probably already know about this, but there's Aokigahara, which is the suicide forest. Some people will like literally go out there to get lost, to like have themselves die. So like if they find their body, they're just like, oh, they were wandering around the forest and got lost, because it's really easy to get lost in that forest. So they can, but also a lot of people commit suicide in that forest. So it's kind of like this gray area when people go out there to kill themselves. Like, did they do it to commit suicide, or did they do it because they got lost, right? To this day, total mystery. And we're talking 9 years ago now almost, and still nothing. If anything ever develops on that case, though, I'll try to follow up and tell you more. Just going through some of those gives me like the chills to talk about those again. I hope you enjoyed these stories today. I know some of them are kind of sad and depressing and dark. Well, that's Osoroshii Saturday for you. I've got really good news, though. All right. While I had to scrap the one Silent Hill Osoroshii Saturday that I was going to do, and while I've been making a new schedule for new Osoroshii Saturdays, I've gathered from the viewers that they want to see a mix between the type of kind of story type videos that I do like language barriers and Soulburn Temple and stuff like that. But they also want to see the old school J-pastas too. The Japanese creepypastas, the urban legends, the ghost stories, the ghost footage. So the good news about that is I'm going to be doing both. I'm going to be switching between the two, because there's sometimes where like I don't have enough time to put together a whole damn story with scenes and everything. Those take almost a week to make 10 minutes of those. And if I don't have enough time, I do have enough time to sit down and just tell some stories and put some visuals over it. Meanwhile, I've got another project going with a really great channel. You may have already heard of it before, Tats Videos, which already has stuff like the creepiest, the top 20, maybe it's 20, might be more, might be 50. Top 20 creepiest non-gaming pastas, creepiest gaming pastas, creepiest Japanese urban legend rituals and stuff like that. Tats Videos is what it's called. You can actually check it out. I actually helped him out with the Japanese rituals video. We're going to be working on a future horror project together that I don't want to kind of release too much information about yet, because I want to make sure I'm like, you know, neck deep in it, that it's almost published before I say 100%. But it's happening now. I've already started gathering the stories and the information, so in the visuals too, and it's coming out pretty damn creepy. I hope for it to be one of the creepiest projects I've ever created. And the great thing is if I can have it up on their channel and work with those guys and have them help narrate it and everything like that, along with myself too. I'll be narrating it too and writing. I'll be writing a lot of it too. It's going to get a lot more viewership, which is something I've always wanted for my Osoroshii Saturday stuff. Now, it won't be an Osoroshii Saturday, but it will be the same type of things. Obviously, I'm not going to make it Osoroshii Saturday and put it on their channel. That doesn't make any sense. It'll be their thing. It'll be actually a shared project with their whole channel crew. So I'll let you know more about that as it develops, but I also wanted to let you know that Osoroshii Saturday is going to be switching between the two. There'll be some times where it's this new version of stories that I, you know, act out and everything and show you scenes from, but it'll also go back to the old school way of showing, you know, ghosts caught on film, but I'm gonna clean it up a little bit more and make it even more kind of streamlined and stuff, as far as even how I do the old school way. They're a little bit too choppy for my taste. I wanted to get it more clean. I feel like with season 3 I was getting very close. Now with season 4 out, I can really make it a perfected project. And as you guys can probably tell, I'm trying to always up the quality of my videos. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed these stories today. I apologize so much to all you awesome Osoroshii and J-Pasta fans who have stuck with me through all these late arrivals of these videos. I'm so sorry I take so long to get these out. One of the big things that really holds me back, I don't like to publish it. I don't like to make a video unless I think it's creepy enough. There's a lot of shit pastas out there. There's a lot of troll pastas out there. There's a lot of just crappy pastas, and Japan's got them too. All right, there's not everything that comes out of Japan is super creepy. There's a lot of crappy, stupid ones out there. There's a lot of these dumb riddle ones, which I really don't like the ones that are riddles. It's like, can you figure it out at the end? Blah, 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 blah. It's so scary. That's not scary to me at all. It's got to kind of disturb me a little bit for it to even get past my filter to you, and that's why sometimes these take so long to come out. I apologize for that. I wish I had more time to look up more stuff. As always, when you have a chance to look up stuff like this and you send it to me, it helps the show so much. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling right now and end this video. I hope this can kind of satiate you until we got the next Osoroshii coming out, and until this big Tats video comes out, which that'll definitely quench your thirst, your hunger, whatever it may be. I'm Unrested. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you want Osoroshii to become more popular, for the quality to improve. I thank you so much for your time and your viewership. Have a good one.